There are stories in racing that everyone knows. Big crashes, big rivalries, big wins. But every once in a while, you stumble across a story that feels a little different. Not because of what happened on the track, but because of what happened behind the scenes. In the early days of NASCAR, the sport wasn't just dangerous. It was controlled, and if you pushed back against that control, even a star could be banned. This is the story of Curtis Turner, one of the most talented drivers NASCAR ever had, and one of the few men NASCAR banned for life. It's hard to explain just how different NASCAR used to be. The sport hadn't grown into the polished corporate machine that we know today. Back then, NASCAR was still finding itself. The cars were heavy, the tracks were rough, and the drivers were oftentimes just regular people who happened to be fearless. Many of them were mechanics, some of them were still moonshiners, and many were just trying to make enough money to survive. The risks were obvious. Safety standards weren't low. They were non-existent. Crashes were normal, injuries were extremely common, and still, the races went on. In those days, NASCAR wasn't just a motorsports organization. It was a kingdom, and Bill France Sr. held the crown. Curtis Turner came from Virginia, and like so many early NASCAR drivers, he didn't arrive with fame or privilege. But what he did have was talent. The kind of talent that you could see in just his first few laps on the track. Curtis Turner wasn't smooth, and he wasn't polite on the track. He raced like he was extremely angry, but for him, it worked. He was very fast, aggressive, and impossible to ignore. And over time, he became exactly what NASCAR needed in that area. A true personality, the kind of driver that fans paid to see. But Curtis Turner wasn't only known for speed, he was known for something else too. He didn't back down from anyone. Not drivers, not teams, and eventually, not even NASCAR itself. When NASCAR was young, it was ran differently than other sports. It wasn't built on committees and negotiations, it was built on authority. And the France family didn't just run NASCAR, they were NASCAR. This meant that rules weren't just about keeping things fair. They were about keeping things under control. And one thing the sport feared more than anything was this: drivers organizing. Because once drivers organized, they could negotiate. They could demand more pay, they could demand better safety, and they could push back against anything that the France family wanted to put into NASCAR. And NASCAR at the time was not interested in sharing power. Many still argue that that's the case today, but back then, it was even more so. In the early 1960s, there was growing interest in bringing a form of labor organization into motorsports. And to be clear, not every driver wanted this. Some drivers just wanted to race. Some didn't trust it. Some felt like it could be considered a union, which they were very against. But others looked at it and saw that something felt unfair. Drivers were risking their lives every single weekend, and yet the sport's structure gave them very little protection. If you got injured, you didn't get support. If you missed races, you didn't get paid. And when you wanted change, you had zero leverage. Curtis Turner became connected to this movement, and whether you agreed with him or not, this was a bold decision. Because NASCAR didn't treat this like it was just a conversation. They treated it like it was a threat. So NASCAR responded the only way that they knew how. They made an example. They banned Curtis Turner for life. And alongside him, another driver was also banned, Tim Flock. No long appeals, no negotiation, just a message. If you challenge NASCAR's authority, you don't race here anymore. The ban wasn't just about Curtis Turner. It was about everyone watching the sport. Because in those years, NASCAR could afford to do something like that. There were always more drivers, always more teams, and always another name that would be wanting to take your place. So NASCAR made it clear, no matter how talented you are, no matter how popular you are, the sport is bigger than you. And if you forget that, you can be erased. To really understand how Curtis Turner ended up banned for life, it helps to look at what NASCAR was at the time. Today, professional racing is shaped by contracts, sponsorships, insurance, unions in some sports, and layers of management. But NASCAR in the early 1960s was still more run like an old-school business, one where the person in charge made the decisions quickly and often without an explanation. Drivers didn't have formal collective bargaining power. There wasn't a drivers' association that had any teeth, and because of that, the relationship between NASCAR and its drivers wasn't balanced. It was closer to something like this. NASCAR gives you a place to race, and you accept those terms. No questions. In that climate, even the idea of a drivers' union was essentially a declaration of war. The push to organize wasn't just about paychecks. It was about leverage, the ability to collectively demand improvements, better purses, safer conditions, and more protection for drivers who were injured. And in the background of this story was the Teamsters, a powerful union that had influence in the United States during that area. Now, it's important to say this. Not every driver was on board with the union idea. Some drivers wanted nothing to do with it. They feared retaliation, and others believed unions didn't belong in racing at all. But regardless of what the drivers thought, Bill France Sr. saw the situation through one lens. If the drivers organize, NASCAR loses control. So when Curtis Turner and others publicly became connected to the effort, NASCAR's response was immediate and harsh. It was framed as permanent, and it was the kind of move that served two purposes at once. It removed the problem, and it warned everyone else. It was essentially, this sport will continue with or without you. And for Curtis Turner, a driver who was in his prime, it meant being cut off from the biggest stage he had. Not because he was slow, not because he couldn't race, but because he challenged the authority NASCAR was built on. Curtis Turner didn't lose a ride. He didn't lose a season. He lost his place in a sport almost overnight. Curtis Turner didn't stay gone forever. Eventually, he was allowed back, and when he returned, he proved something that made this story even more impressive. He wasn't finished. Even after the controversy, even after time away, he still had what it took to compete. But the damage was done, because no matter what happened next, Curtis Turner's story became a warning in NASCAR history. A reminder that early NASCAR wasn't just risky on the track, it could be ruthless off of it as well. It's easy to look at NASCAR today and think the controversies are new. Arguments about the rules, penalties, and favoritism. But the truth is, the power struggles have always been there since day one in NASCAR. Curtis Turner wasn't banned because he cheated, he wasn't banned because he wrecked someone, and he wasn't banned because of some drug-related or domestic abuse charge. He was banned just because he challenged NASCAR's control. And for a while, NASCAR decided he wasn't just a driver they needed to discipline. He was a driver they needed to remove. And in the early days of NASCAR, that was the ultimate punishment. If you like more motorsports history like this, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me out a lot.